Hello, bro. How are you?
Mary, what's going on? How are things in your neck of the woods?
Good, good. I'm, back and forth a lot between LA and Denver these days, just for family reasons, but mostly in LA, enjoying the great weather. I know you were in San Francisco this week, doing your annual jaunt to Silicon Valley, gracing them with your presence. How was that?
It was great. I don't think they can handle me out in Silicon Valley. I think they're too in their own world often. It was great. I was at a conference, live ramp up. They're a big ad tech identity platform. They're the people who know everything about you. So that's everyone who browses the internet and buys things. They're very much the people who provide a service that allows you to know, allows businesses to know who you are and what you're doing online and things like that. And people like that or they don't like that. There's a lot of smart people around the org, but it's been a fun week for tech. I mean, all the earnings are coming in. Of all the public companies. One of my favorites, Snowflake. Big news this week, right? Like their CEO Frank Slootman, uh, Silicon Valley darling. He's out as the CEO. It's something I predicted for a while. And I trade on this information. And yeah, it's been an interesting week. There's a lot of stuff going on as well around. Next week with GitLab. It's another interesting one. So a lot going on, and one of the big things to tie it and segue this into our conversation today is all the layoffs that are happening, and that's everybody from engineers, people who are U.S. citizens versus people who are on visas or have another type of immigration status. It's salespeople, people who are paid variably based on commission. It's engineers. That's been a growing trend. I mean, there's more people getting laid off now in tech than at any point in the last couple of years.
It's
There's a
wild
big
that
wave of it.
it's not making the top headlines in the same way it was a year ago because it was newer then, but it's still happening. It's then we have all the headlines around kind of it's the end of the big cushy tech job. I don't believe that's true at all, but it's just an evolving, trends within the big cushy tech jobs, and certainly maybe fewer of them than before.
Yeah, and so I'm excited to talk to Dan today.
Yeah, let's
Yeah, I'll let you, Mary, lead it in.
bring him on. Yeah, welcome to the show, Dan Goodman. Dan Goodman, who is founder of the Dan Goodman Employment Advisory, DGEA. Did I say that right, Dan?
You sure did, Mary. Nice to see you guys.
So yeah, Dan is a buddy of mine. I'm proud to say I have used his services, learned a ton from him. And why don't you just tell us what you do? Because you have such an unusual profile, Dan, that, when I tell people about you, I'm like, he's an employment advocate. And people are like,
what's that?
What the F is that? And why did I just censor myself? I always say, what the fuck? I'm being a bit too professional for a Tech Bro show. And then when I first reached out to you, I thought that you were an attorney, even though you in no way misrepresent yourself as an attorney. You make that very clear. But we tend to think, oh, I got laid off, or I got fired, I potentially got screwed over, I don't know my rights. People might reach for an attorney, whereas you're very much someone who provides a different, and I would say better service. So go for it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll just add to that point that a lot of folks tell me that when they go to the attorney, they're not really getting what they need in terms of the support. It's very much focused on just the legal aspect only. And one of the things that makes the practice unique as an employee advocate is that we support the employee, throughout the process. A lot of times they come to us, they're beaten down, they're questioning their self-confidence, they're wondering, what did I do to deserve this? And they're a shell of their former selves. So one of the things that we help them do is realize that this is not a reflection on them. This is something that happens all the time, every day, to tens of thousands of people. It's a reflection of bad behavior by organizations and not a reflection on you. So I just want to add that piece. So I am an employee advocate. I started this practice a year ago, February 1st. Since that time, we've got almost 670 clients in that time period.
Wow.
I help folks.
You're doing better than most of these venture funded startups, to be honest, right? I don't know any of them that have that many clients.
So we help across 8 different practice areas for employees. We help out with employment agreements, restrictive clauses, severance, PIPs, stock equity grants, comp plans, commission disputes or wage issues, and then general coaching, guidance, and advice. So those are sort of the 8 practice areas. This business sort of started on its own, really. I started a company called True Commish, which is a commission audit service to help salespeople verify commission pay as a way to promote the business. I started posting on LinkedIn, and I put together a post about severance. It got 400,000 impressions. Within a week, I had 20 people pleading with me to help them review their severance agreement. I was doing that for about 6 months for free for folks. I had one guy from Israel reached out. He asked for some consultation about a business endeavor that he had. I gave him about 30 minutes of time, some great advice. He says, Dan, how much do I owe you? I said, I'm not really charging people for this. Then he called me a name in Hebrew. I didn't really know what it was. I said, what does that mean? Because it means you're a sucker. I said, what do you mean? I just gave you all this great advice and now you're calling me a sucker? He said, exactly. Only a sucker would not charge for giving out such great advice. So he sent me $300 for my time. And from that point on, I started charging as of February 1st of last year, and the business has just taken off beyond belief.
Fantastic. And what's your background that gave you, because this requires knowledge of a few different things, obviously of various industries. And what we're going to be asking you about is sort of how you've been helping tech workers, but also a certain amount of knowledge of contracts, of law. What's your professional background that makes you such a brain in this?
I don't know. I mean, I'm an inquisitive person. I've been challenging and questioning things since I came out of the womb. Drove my parents crazy. I've been around business and contracts, and I've worked at a law firm at one point in a business development capacity. I've done strategic planning. I've done contracts. I've done a whole bunch of things, and I've always been someone who's been very challenging and questioning, and I've helped friends and family stand up to employers going back 25, 30 years, whether it's around commission issues, whether it's around severance or disputes with their employer. The real issue here is that we cannot walk away a victim. We must stand up to it. We must question it. We cannot be blindly loyal and blindly trusting of employers. They will take advantage of you eventually, and you're setting yourself up for failure if you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lauren, did you want to jump in? Have you been through any of this ever? You're such an angel who never speaks her mind. So I bet every employer has just, never taken.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've, a long time, I've been a huge advocate of this type of stuff, not at Dan's level, obviously, but yeah, I mean, I would, first of all, anyone looking at this on YouTube or on LinkedIn or anywhere else we stream it, feel free to jump in and ask questions as well. We'll get into a lot of stuff here, but, I would ask, like, a lot of times in the life cycle of employment, the first sign of a problem, or maybe the relationship's not going so well between employee and employer, is what's called a PIP or a performance plan or something else of that nature. That's something that's widely used in the tech industry and elsewhere, but very, very, very common in tech. What should employees be doing or thinking about when something like that occurs? And is that really always the beginning of the end? Is that something that can be recovered from? Like, how should people be thinking about that when that PIP or performance plan occurs?
Excellent question. So I refer to PIPs as a paid interview period. I mean, back 30 years ago, PIPs might have been used with some good intent, maybe half the time. Now I can't even say that it's used 5% of the time with good intent. I've probably talked to 200 people that had PIP issues. One of them thought it was a legitimate PIP out of 200 people, honestly. I mean, if you're put on it, there's so many other ways to improve performance without the threat of your job hanging in the balance. If you actually got, and I haven't yet to see a PIP that actually was for a realistic amount of time. I mean, you're given 30 days when you've got a 6-month sales cycle. You're given things that you've never been measured on or asked to do before for the sole purpose of being demeaning and disrespectful so that your employer can micromanage you to death about it. And if you do achieve your real number of hitting that revenue target, well, now they've got something to terminate you over about something that really doesn't matter. So this is a game that goes on around PIPs. I tell folks that you should start looking for a job right away. I tell them not to. Another thing that folks are doing right now, it's games going on all the time. You're being given a choice. You can take this PIP, which we basically tell you have no chance of achieving. They'll tell you that right up front. Or you can take this 2-week severance. But they dress the 2-week they tell the severance, you think it's a termination, you might be eligible for unemployment. It's really a mutual resignation dressed up as a severance or a termination. And when you do that, you will not be eligible for unemployment. The goal of a PIP is for employers to reduce separation costs. They want you to think that you're no good. We don't want you here anymore. Your performance is bad. You're an employee at will, and we can let you go anytime that we want. We are nice enough to give you these 2 weeks. You better run to the bank with it and take it before we change your mind. It couldn't be further opposite of the truth. They provide severance so that you'll sign a release of liability, so that you promise to never sue and release them of all claims past, present, and future. That's the only reason why they do it. They give you a PIP so that you'll not contest the termination. You'll not attempt to negotiate the severance. You'll go away quietly because you don't deserve anything else. That's the mindset that they have.
This is an hour of free Dan Goodman advice that normally he'd be charging his deservedly high price for. So soak it in, people.
I mean, that's the goal. I mean, employers want to reduce the separation costs. They will literally sit there and lie about you, demean you, disrespect you about your performance. I mean, I was talking to 30 people that were 100+% over quota that were terminated for performance. They're literally making stuff up about you didn't follow our process. You didn't follow our procedure. But yes, I've sold 50% more than anybody in the company. And they want to do this so they can steal commission, not pay it out, and put it right to the bottom line. And that way, managers and directors and VPs can make their quarterly bonuses at the expense of the employee who has sacrificed so much for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to make it more practical, what are like the 3 things you do when something like that happens to you? Or maybe it's 4 things, or like, is it immediately start looking, contact you, a lawyer, somebody? Is it, push back on it, like as it's delivered? What are a couple immediate things that can be done?
So the first thing I always ask folks is, what is your desired outcome? Is your desire to stay here, or is it to really leave? And if it's, so choose that path. And then, we assess it. Do you want to bring this PIP thing to a head and then bring it to a termination and potentially a severance? I want you to identify leverage that you can use so that you can bring this to a head. Oftentimes, this PIP is associated with a boss who's acting in a toxic way, who's being demeaning and disrespectful, maybe discriminatory. There's an angle of that there that you can play. But I have consulted with dozens and dozens of employees to help them bring the PIP to a severance and then negotiate a fair severance package at that point. Let me add to that. I really find this whole PIP thing such a waste of time and so disgusting and such a waste of money. Now, this is how people should be terminated, okay? If I decide to say, Lauren, it's time to let you go. You've been here for 3 or 4 years. You're an employee at will. We valued your contributions here. Thank you very much. But now we're going to go into a different direction. So I'm going to come to you, Lauren. I'm going to say, take the next 30 or 60 days, maybe 60 days as a full-fledged employee, full rights, full access, everything. If you want to keep working here, great. If you don't want to keep working, you want to just go look for a job during this time, we fully support it. If after 2 months you haven't got a job yet, we're going to then let you go. We're going to give you a severance of either 2 to 4 weeks per year worked plus COBRA. And we're going to give you that for 2 to 4 weeks per year worked. So is there an employee out there that wouldn't love the employer for the transparency, for the honesty, for the respect? How much time is being wasted between the HR person, the manager, writing up the PIP, monitoring it, having these updates? It's just such a waste of time for everybody. I will argue that you'll save money, okay, and everything else by being honest and transparent and giving them that time and respect.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
when you let people go, I mean, ultimately, so many people I've seen aren't expecting even a severance anyway. So if you do it in this proper way and give them even something small, that could be a game changer for the employees as well. I find whenever I hear that someone's been laid off or fired, my response is, well, what are you negotiating? And they're like, what do you mean? Like, negotiate this stuff? And I'm like, you absolutely can. And, I did about 10 years of my career in France. So like a culture where workers absolutely do have rights. In some cases, even as a hardcore lefty, I'd say almost too many rights. The US, where it's, we don't have an awful lot of rights. What I've found is that people just assume they have 0 rights. And the fact is, even as at-will employees, we have rights. Can you get into that a little bit? Like what should people know in terms of what they can or can't negotiate?
Well, bring me back to what they can negotiate. But I did want to mention the point that you just mentioned about the at-will employment, because that is a big issue that folks are very confused about. Okay, at-will employment really refers to the employee. that they are at will. They can come and go anytime they want. It's being misapplied. They're trying to make it say that the employer is at will, meaning the employer can let you go anytime they want.
Interesting. I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Okay. They cannot break the law. They cannot steal from you. They cannot discriminate you to you. There's dozens and dozens of scenarios where someone who cannot be randomly terminated. That's why we have things called protected classes. Terminations have to be justified. When they're not justified, then it's illegal and wrongful, and then it needs to be pursued. Okay. As far as what you can negotiate in a severance, anything is open. The first thing, obviously, is the severance dollar amount itself, right? Healthcare or COBRA is another thing that you can traditionally negotiate. If you're in sales, commissions that are pending, deals that have closed but haven't been paid out yet, by all means, you should be negotiating that. I've created a template for sales folks to plug in their pipeline to show the month and quarter that the deal is expected to close, the client name, the revenue, and the expected commission based on the accelerators. And then depending on how far along that deal is, you'll apply a percentage. And that's basically the value of your pipeline. And we attempt to negotiate that in every severance that we're working with sales folks with. Other things that you can negotiate, your restrictive clauses. By all means, if they're terminating you, there should not be a non-compete left in place. And frankly, non-competes are going away. I mean, there's 5 states right now that it's completely illegal. The rumors are that the federal government is going to make it illegal on the national level this spring. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. The one clause that's concerning for me personally is the non-solicit. That is one thing that can really screw up your career. If you've only been in a relatively small industry for a long time, and you are now limited to be able to sell to any clients or prospects that this company that you worked at had ever had, and if they're an 800-pound gorilla that have an 80% market share, you can't work in that industry for the next year. So you got to be careful both going in with the employment contract and when you're leaving with the severance agreement to make sure that your rights are being honored and you're not being taken advantage of.
And take your time before you sign the damn thing. Most people think that because they're given the impression that they have to sign it really, really fast. And people generally have at least 7 days. And if you're 40 or older, you have, by law, I believe, 21 days.
So the 7 days doesn't apply. When you're under 40, it can be any number of days. The standard that they typically give is 7. I've seen as little as 3. I've seen as little as you have until the end of the day. If you're over 40 and you're not laid off and you're laid off by yourself, then you have 21 days to review it and 7 days to revoke the agreement after you've signed it. If you're over 40 years old, then you have 45 days to sign it and 7 days to revoke it. I was just speaking with a client this morning. He was 43 years old. The company gave him 7 days to review it and was pressuring him to sign it. So I basically just told him what the law was. I sent him a screenshot of something. He sent it off with an email, and he got his time extended to 45 days because he was let go with somebody else. I have another scenario where someone was let go. They were given the 21 days as over 40. I told them that you're entitled to 45 because they were let go with one other person. And they said, no, that's not a layoff. That was just one other person that let go. If you're let go with more than one person is being let go, it's considered a layoff, and you get the 45 days.
Fantastic. Such good information.
How does this all play out as well with layoffs versus just separating with you one person as an individual? How does that negotiation change? Like if your whole department of 20, 30 people is getting laid off, how does that kind of change the calculus of how employees should be thinking about this as they enter these negotiations?
It's a great question, Lauren. I mean, in general, if there's a big layoff and business is tough and you need to cut back, those things happen. What I've seen so many times is when managers are not liking their employees and there's issues and they were never even intended to be part of the layoff, they'll throw them into the layoff pile at the very end. I literally had a scenario. So let me back up. So when you're over 40, the Older Workers Protection Benefit Act, okay, they have to justify your termination. So what they do is they provide you a list of all the employees who were considered for termination, their job title, their age. They used to do salary. I don't think they do that anymore. And then all the ones who were actually terminated out of that. And then you can do some analysis on it. What was the ratio above or below 40? What was the ratio of men to women for the ones who were considered and the ones who were terminated? And you can draw conclusions and analysis from how that was done. We just went over one the other day with somebody. 70% of the employees that were considered for termination were over 40, and 100% of the employees who were terminated were over 40. So, they have these laws in place to try to cover up some of this discrimination, or try to not cover up, but to bring forward this discrimination. And the employers try to cover that up quite a bit. So, did I answer your question, Lauren?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, discrimination and, men versus women in your last example. Like, there are federal laws in the U.S. There's state to state, jurisdiction to jurisdiction laws. Like, how can people, better arm themselves if someone is a member of a, certain group? What should they be looking into about how they're, protected or maybe not protected?
Yeah, I mean, so there's the EEOC, which is a government body that is in place to protect employees against discriminatory acts. You can file a complaint with the EEOC. Once that complaint is filed, they'll interview you within a couple of weeks. And if they deem that you have a case, they'll then open up an investigation, and then they'll reach out to the company and let them know there's been a formal complaint that has been opened against them by the EEOC and this individual. Oftentimes that alone will be enough to now bring the employer to the employee and negotiate a settlement contingent on them withdrawing the complaint. So that's something. I mean, as far as these protected classes that we're talking about, it could be based on age, based on disabilities, based on religious beliefs. There's dozens and dozens of accommodations and protected classes in place that employers must honor.
And I've done some research and had personal experience with the EEOC, both as a journalist and then once when I got fired from a journalism job where like the head of HR had been, harassing me for a long time and, all sorts of comments about my status as a single mother and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, great, I'm taking this to the EEOC, and what I discovered is that a lot of what the EEOC, you think the EEOC can do, they can't. And it's kind of a joke. It's a very long process. I think it was like, I signed up for, you go into their office for a meeting. Now you can do it on Microsoft Teams, but back then you have to do it in person. It was a 9-month wait. Like obviously not, there for your rights as someone who just got fired or whatever. And then, I had documented a certain amount of what I'd been through, but, they basically said, unless you recorded every call, like we can't help you. And I said, but I live in California. It's a 2-party consent state. I cannot record any calls without, letting people know. And this is hilarious because the EEOC is there to enforce laws. And they said, every job from now on, you should record everything, to protect yourself, even at the sake of breaking these.
So I have a little trick that can go around that sometimes.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's been litigated or not, but so you're not allowed to record the spoken word. You're allowed to videotape. So what I tell folks to do is to go on a Zoom, open up Microsoft Word and turn on the dictation function. And it will literally write down every single thing that's said. And you have not recorded the voice.
Yeah. In that case, I would have had a fantastic case if I'd had these astonishing conversations.
Here's another little trick. Someone has done this and told me about it. I had never heard of this. So people are terminated all the time on these Zoom calls or on these phone calls or what have you, right? So this is what you do. Take your computer, turn it on to airplane mode. So when they try to wipe your computer in the middle of the call so that you can't have access to any of the information to make your case of the wrongdoing by the employer, now you find out it's not connected to the internet. You can download whatever information you need to make your case, turn the airplane mode back off, and now they wipe the computer and you've got what you need.
And often, you're going into those calls, like you see the sudden 15-minute meeting on scheduled on your calendar.
Exactly.
I know Lauren wants to say something, but I want to add to that first. This gets at the number one piece of advice that I give people, which is even hopefully prior to these calls, even in a job where you think you're comfortable and you think you're not going to get laid off or fired, document stuff on your personal devices, screenshots, not on your work computer. We tend to, in tech anyway, to do most of our stuff on our work computers. Any emails, any Slack messages, anything that you're not sure about whatever. And, ultimately, most of the time you're not going to have to use them. But the day that something happens, you're going to be really, really kicking yourself for not having
Yeah, I
documents.
mean, half the clients I speak to tell me about how they have such incredible, information and data and evidence, but it's been, their system's been wiped or locked out and they don't have access to it. So I always tell people to set a reminder once a week on a calendar and take 15 minutes. Get your employment agreement, get your restrictive clauses, get your comp plan, get your stock equity grant, get all your performance reviews, replicate your pipeline, get all your emails, Slacks. If anytime anyone has ever said anything good about you, get a copy of it. Anytime anyone's ever said anything bad about you, you know what often happens? It becomes 10 times worse months and months down the road than it was at the time. I've seen people that were terminated for things that happened 12 months earlier that was investigated, resolved, and no issue. And now that's being brought forward as a reason for the termination. You want to cover your...
There's got to be some extension, or someone's got to have an app for this that does all that automatically, right? Forwards your work emails and, does a weekly, screenshot of your Slacks. I don't know. The tech people watching, make something that does this so people automate it, for God's sakes.
But I will say, like you said, Mary, you got to be careful. I've had two clients two people who came to me after the fact, but they got a severance. Their companies did not lock them out of their systems. So they went and downloaded information to help them with their case.
Oh, yeah.
The company's alarms went off internally. They were now gone from a terminated with a severance to now terminated with cause, and the severance was pulled because they downloaded information after they were terminated. I'm like, wait, how can you terminate me for cause and I'm already terminated? So two different cases within a couple of weeks of the same thing happening. So take pictures, be careful of downloads. Your IT folks have all kinds of bells and whistles in there. Don't have that come back and bite you in the butt.
Be smart about it, yeah. Or be like Gen Z and just live stream everything and whatever. You got witnesses. Question from Ramona, who's enjoying the fact that there are finally some advantages of being over 40. Yes, the law gives us some advantages, Ramona. But technical questions. She says, how can you have that Zoom call if you're on airplane mode? Are you saying just shut it on, put it on airplane mode and cut off the Zoom?
Whether it's a lot of times these are phone calls. And technically if it is on the Zoom, it's the same computer. That can be an issue.
I would say go on airplane mode and say, sorry, technical problems, and come back.
Or go on your personal computer.
Yeah.
For the Zoom meeting, your personal computer, jump on that one, say, hey, my whatever.
Protect yourself.
There's always a way around something. You just got to be creative.
Yeah. Go for it, Lauren. I've been monopolizing Dan here.
No, I wanted to ask about there's different ways employees are compensated. There's your like you mentioned, you work a lot with salespeople, so there's obviously commission in place. There's base salaries, there's healthcare. There's also equity with a lot of these tech companies, and public. Those are public stock options. You get however many shares per quarter or per year of the public stock. But at a lot of these private companies, the equity is kind of woo-woo and up in the air. And a lot of what I do personally is play around in that space with various investment things. But how should employees who work at these tech companies that are private, who are given some kind of equity grant, think about this? Or is that even not something they should really worry about, considering that it's kind of up in the air? How does that kind of work in your opinion?
Excellent. Great question. So you want to look at startup equity or private company equity one of two ways. Either it's, incremental compensation that you're getting along the way as a grant, or you're leaving a really good place and coming here for the equity opportunity. For the latter, you better make sure you really understand what you're getting. There's all kinds of tricks that go on with equity. If I've looked at all kinds of different employment-related legal contracts, the equity one is by far the most comprehensive, the most legalese, the most confusing. I've seen so much trickery in these documents, you would not believe it. In fact, I just got off a call with someone yesterday that the same thing happened for the third time. I couldn't even believe it. So they'll hide stuff in there. They'll put call options in there. So you'll help the company increase the value of that equity significantly. And now you've vested it and you're going to leave or what have you. And they have clauses in there that they have the right to call that back, buy it from you at a price that they determine, even though eliminating your ability on the upside that's about to happen for this horrible situation. I've seen other scenarios where they have dual vesting clauses that you don't even know about, buried deep in the doc. You can't even do a word search on it because it doesn't even use the word vesting. Okay. So there'll be the 10-year vest, the 4-year, 1-year cliff, 3-year monthly after that. But then they'll also have something that you have to be an employee at the time of the transaction. And unless you meet both criteria, you don't have any equity. I literally just got off the phone with somebody, I think it was yesterday, about this exact scenario. So you got to be really careful. If you're going there for equity, make sure, and here's a third one for you. I have seen many instances where people thought they had equity, they never had it. It was rights,
Wow.
or it was appreciation units. Okay. It was never equity. It never converts to equity. If there's a distribution, you don't participate in it. At the very, very end, if you're still around, they'll bring it up to the common and you'll get your cut of it if there's anything left at that point. The other thing that you need to really be careful with equity is that dilution. And when you're talking about dilution, there's multiple rounds that are being raised. The debt holders go first. The preferred go next. And if there's anything left over for the common, then you get what's left. The preferred could have 2, 3, 4x conversion ratios to common. Okay, leaving the common shareholders with virtually nothing. So just because you have equity, and even if there is a transaction, okay, or an outcome, that doesn't mean that you'll end up getting anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So is that something that, like, people who are in this situation where they're getting laid off or terminated or, pipped or something, is that something that, like, the average employee should even be worried about? Or is that kind of something to, get the cash, get your commission paid out, and, just use that as leverage, the equity piece, but assume it's not coming, like yeah, just in terms of that negotiation.
Yeah, it depends if it's worth something. I mean, I've talked to a number of folks that feel that there's a transaction happening within 6 to 12 months, likely to go for an IPO or something like that. The challenge with the equity when you're being let go is that typically you'll have 90 days to exercise the options. And a lot of people, when they're being let go, can't afford to do that right now. They don't know when the next paycheck is coming in. They don't know if this equity is ever going to be worth anything. So what I tell folks to do as part of the severance negotiation, and I've seen it happen many, many times, is to extend that option, the time period to exercise the options from 90 days to 12 months. I've even had a company that offered them 5 years to extend it to. So that's one thing that I would absolutely look at. And then as far as the other pieces there, I mean, if you think the equity will be worth something, I would suggest purchasing it. I mean, you can absolutely negotiate that potentially as part of the severance agreement too. You're negotiating payouts, and you can negotiate the equity as well. I tell people to negotiate additional vesting. If the equity means something to them, maybe they've got 2 years left on the vest. Ask for another 12 months between now and the rest of the year. I've seen them be willing to do that a handful of times.
Sure. Absolutely. And, anyone here, of course, so we have a few comments, but feel free to ask any questions about any of this.
Anne Stoltzman, our buddy from Rivian, she had a comment about having been through a PIP. She said, I was in an unrealistic one after an LOA. Is that a mass layoff, an LOA?
Leave of absence.
Leave of absence.
Okay. Oh, after leave of absence. So she was in an unrealistic PIP after a leave of absence where apparently the work stopped while she was gone. It shouldn't have stopped. And the weekly performance deadlines were impossible to achieve. Yeah, sounds like a typical thing where they wanted to get rid of you, Anne. And yeah, it's a mind fuck, like a lot of it. And you just have to be tough, and you have to know your rights. And I know I've been through either layoffs or getting fired 3 times now, which I don't think is rare for someone who's 44, almost 45, and switched industries a couple times. And the first time I came out with nothing, and the next 2 times I came out doing all right, and one time walked away with a big check. So but learning as I go, learning how to stand up for myself. And generally I think companies, tell me if I'm wrong, Dan, but companies don't expect you to know your rights. Like big and small companies, they think that you're just going to sign it and you're going to be scared, and you're by definition you're vulnerable, even if you're someone who knows you can land another job quickly. Like you're suddenly facing this economic precarity. The vast majority of us depend on our paycheck each month and need it. So
yeah, I mean, most employees have no idea that you can even negotiate severance. And if they do know you can, they have no idea where to even start or how to go about it. So if 70-80% of the employees either don't know how to do it, don't know that you can do it, or don't want to be bothered because they need to move on and put this behind them, do you think employers are going to offer initially what they're willing to pay? I mean, almost all of my customers that we're working with, when they do increase it, are starting at least a double, and sometimes 3x, 5x, even 10x. I mean, I've had 6 clients that increased their severance by more than $100,000. The largest one was a CRO who increased it by almost $370,000. The money is there to be had. If you don't ask, you're guaranteed a no. I have never seen a scenario where a severance has either been reduced or eliminated. They don't offer it because they're nice or they feel bad. The same release of liability that they were paying the severance for has the same value today, next week, or a month from now. So don't be bullied and intimidated with these false deadlines, pressured and coerced into signing it. You don't be worried about if you try to negotiate it, they'll pull it. Another thing that people are afraid of is that reputationally damaging. I won't get references. This will come back to haunt me. People will find out that I stood up for myself and I won't be hired in the future. I don't buy any of that.
No, one of the things we've said a few times on this show, Lauren and I, neither of us are afraid of burning bridges. And I know personally, the more bridges I burn, the better off I continue to do and work my way up in life, financially, professionally, everything. But we live in a world where on every level, people are so terrified of speaking their minds, asserting their rights. And if anything, I found it brings you, respect. Ramona says that an employee has to simultaneously do 2 jobs, their job and documenting everything for future need. Absolutely. And it's pretty easy once you get in the habit. And Angela Hurdle wants to know where she can find you. Angela, Dan has a fantastic LinkedIn page with, a lot of the testimonials on there and kind of daily posts. So, where do you want to take this next, Lauren?
No, what do you see happening in the next couple of months here with the industry? I mean, I'm speaking more broadly about trends. I see no signs of these layoffs stopping, at least in the broader tech space, tech companies or tech jobs at non-tech companies. Although everything's kind of a tech company these days. But what do you see happening, through the rest of 2024? And if a competitor has a layoff, should you be worried about a layoff? Like, how should people be thinking about this?
So yeah, that was a great point you brought up at the start of the show. So layoffs are great. Wall Street loves layoffs. You announced that first big one. You're telling everybody about how we're so generous and we give people that worked here 3 months, 5 months severance and all that stuff. But you know what happens? It continues over and over and over again. But it's an informal layoff, and they do it with this PIP process, and they just sit there and drip people out of the organization week after week after week, and it has the same impact as a small layoff. But they do it to basically cover up for things. I mean, where I'm sitting, I'm literally getting 50, 60 DMs every single day. I'm getting 15 to 30 leads every day for people looking for guidance around employment issues. The level of volume of inquiries regarding severance is rapidly escalating over the last 6 months. I think that, publicly, the mass layoffs are not getting as much attention as they did a year and a half ago. It's all being done quietly and wrongly. And they're doing it intentionally to reduce separation costs at the expense of the employees. As far as what I see in the future, I only go out about 6 months in my view. And my view is that, I'm thinking mid-end summer, early fall. It's not looking pretty in terms of the job market. I think that we're going to continue to see these layoffs. In terms of, where the stock market is right now, really nervous about that. It's so far ahead of itself again. I think we're in for a tough time right now in terms of the stock market. If the stock market crashes, the economy continues to sputter and the layoffs pile up, it could be ugly for a little while. I'm thinking the fall. In the fall, I'm hoping that things will turn around. Although I think I said that last year at this time for the fall.
And I think even if things improve, you're gonna have enough business because you've got the momentum now. Even in boom times, there's always layoffs or people getting fired. We're gonna need these services. Question here from Aaron Slavin in Florida. He said he'd love to hear Dan's opinion on an organization that just ignores the existence of a fully executed employment agreement, which includes a specified severance clause. Obviously, if the existence of an agreement is being denied, the business-friendly provisions like non-compete, non-solicitation, non-disparagement can apply. What's one to do other than burn the company down figuratively?
No, I mean, if you've got an employee, I'm assuming that the person's already been let go and the company's now not paying out the severance that was in the employment agreement. I mean, you can go a couple of different ways. I mean, you could potentially go to a Department of Labor and see if they can step in, although it's technically not wages, but it is in a contract. I've had a number of clients have very successful outcomes there, similar to the EEOC, where you open up a claim, it's against the company, there's a file that's been sent, and sometimes just the letter itself from that government agency will be enough to move the employer. Employers don't do anything because because 95% of all employees don't do anything. They just sit there and they take it and they walk away in silence, a victim, encouraging the employer to do it over and over again. They're not only encouraging the employer, they're incentivizing the employer to do it over and over again. So, I mean, you know, if you've got an ironclad contract, I would go directly to the employer. I would lay this thing out. I would highlight this right here. I would demand that they pay it out. And if not, I'll be letting them know that I'm going to take legal matters to this, which they'll be paying for my legal cost and damages associated for the non-wage payment.
And the more people start doing this, I mean, kind of, you know, it's you're doing it for yourself, and you're
The next one.
For everyone else. Like, as cheesy it is, like, be the change you want to see in the world. If we start asserting our rights, then we're going to have more power. Question here from, I can't see the name on it, from generic LinkedIn user, who has a question that I don't know the answer to. Is there a case to be made about negotiating terms of layoffs or severance when you're first getting hired, and negotiate that into your contract?
Absolutely. I had a call with somebody about yesterday on that as well. If you have leverage and they want you, okay, then you can negotiate. If you've been out of work for 6 months, you desperately need the job, you know, I would take the job and get the income and then figure it out from there. You know, typically, you know, negotiating a severance agreement and an employment contract will happen for the C-suite typically. You know, if you're a key employee that's being heavily recruited and walking away from a ton, you can write your own ticket. You can write your own customized comp plan. You know, you can edit or negotiate your restrictive clauses. You can negotiate even some of your stock plan. I personally have done all those things for myself at a prior startup. So all those things can happen. You just need to be educated. You need to know what your rights are. You need to know when you have leverage and then utilize it.
And potentially the type of clause that could be so much more valuable than something we think about often, like sign-on bonuses. Like, this could be so much more valuable.
Well, sign-on bonus is another great one. It's another tricky thing. If you have a sign-on bonus or a relocation bonus or retention bonus, and if they let you go, make sure that you don't have to pay a penny of it back. If you leave on your own, make sure it's prorated. If you leave after 11 months, you should not have to pay 100% of that sign-on bonus back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What are some of the, some of the kind of customer testimonials you like to tell, where, you know, the cases that I'm most aware of tend to be, because, you know, I work in tech, a woman in tech, despite being a tech bro, a woman in tech, you know, I've seen a lot or tuned into a lot of the just horrific discrimination that happens towards women in particular, especially in this latest round of layoffs, seen, you know, several women who were out on maternity leave who got laid off. All sort of the top performers, you know, sitting next to slacker dudes who, because they're one of the boys club, you know, their jobs are protected. But women or others, what are some of the cases that you like to highlight when you?
Well, I'll give you two. One is a woman, and it might be my favorite all-time case. I did a post about her. I think she got $43,000 severance initially offered. She was a VP, been there for like, I don't know, 6-8 years. Traumatized for years, bullied, intimidated, discriminated against, $35,000 a year lower salary for 5 years than her male counterparts, the whole thing. She came to me. The first hour we spent, she spent 55 minutes of it on the phone crying. Okay. I gave her my framework, my video, everything to write up her case and then come back to me. 10 days goes by. I haven't heard from her. I'm like, what's going on here? You know, so I reach out to her, schedule another call, another 45 minutes of crying. She hasn't touched it. She hasn't been able to get off the mat. So I spent about an hour just trying every avenue to coach her, to coax her, to pump her up, to let her know this is not about her and everything. And then I was trying to get her to write this thing up, to get going, and she just couldn't do it. Finally, I was about to have the first client that I was ever just going to give up on. We weren't getting anywhere. And I tried one more way. The light went on. She said, Dan, let me go off for an hour and do this. She called me back. I said, you got it. She went off and spent the next 14 consecutive hours writing a 20-page document that was the most therapeutic thing that she's ever done in her life. She came back to me after writing that a completely different person. She was like a warrior. She was out for blood. We sent off this document. The first one, it went from 43,000 to like 80,000. We kept going and going and going, and she was loving every minute of it. It was unbelievable. The change in her personality and the confidence that she got. We ended up taking this thing all the way from 43,000 to $215,000. Okay. And it was the most gratifying, and it wasn't even about the money. It was seeing.
I was going to say it was that process that
it was unbelievable. The last thing I'll tell you is I had this guy I worked with. He came to me. He was offered $20K. We went from $20K to $42K. We're getting ready to now counter it again to see if to keep going. And I said to him, I was looking for a little love back. I said, hey, Joe, you must be feeling pretty good right now. We just more than doubled your severance. You got $22,000 extra. So I was like, okay, let me hear it. He says, you know what, Dan? I don't give a crap about the money. I'm like, what? It's like, what are you talking about? He says, the lesson that I've learned, the education that I've gotten to understand the mindset and the games that employers play, the confidence that you've given me to stand up to things moving forward, that is worth so much more than the $22K. I'll piss through that with 2 months of my mortgage and real estate taxes and expenses, and it'll be gone. What I've learned from you, I'll have for a lifetime. We ended up going from 22 to 43 to 72, and he was done. That was the most gratifying experience I think I might have had.
I love it. And I love how you really focus on that human element because, with job loss of any kind, I've seen so many people who don't even tell their families, don't tell anyone that they got fired, got laid off, because there's so much deep shame around it, when the reality is, like, if you, I don't know, got in a fight with a friend or, something happened, we talk more openly about those things. But people are it's not just the financial vulnerability, it's like our identities are attached to it. It's deep emotional stuff. And that's what you're doing in addition to getting people money.
So I just had my fifth client. I just had my fifth client. The 2 of them had attempted. 3 of them were considering suicide.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. After job loss?
From work solely based on how they were treated from their employer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Others are on mental health leave because of the treatment of their employer, are terminated while on mental health leave.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a case where the type of situation where I'd say, as someone who almost always sympathizes more with women, say, something that because men aren't socialized to talk about the emotional side, the psychological side. The more we can do for everyone is just fantastic. We have Tim D 1387 here. I don't know his real name. Do you know who Tim D is, Lauren? Probably we know him on LinkedIn. Anyway, he's watching on YouTube. He says, getting laid off absolutely crushed my confidence. I wish I had tried getting more money when I got laid off from Matillion in May. I'm still trying to get a job now. Absolutely brutal. Awesome that you're speaking out about it here. More power to you. If Lauren or I can help you, since you're at Matillion, let us know. We've got contacts in the industry.
So Tim, this is exactly what I'm talking about. What Tim feels right now, and I'll give you a story about that as well. If you do not stand up to it, call it out, and just walk away a victim, you will have regret, and it will stay with you a long time. It absolutely will. This was back last fall, 2 falls ago, I think it was, before I started even, this business for real. I spoke to a guy. He saw me on LinkedIn doing stories. He said, Dan, I got a story for you. So he got on a call. It wasn't really a great story, so I didn't even publish it. But he was telling me about he was terminated. It was a $60,000 commission theft. Okay, and he's talking about it. We're talking. I'm like, wow, when did this happen? It sounded like it was like last week. It was 13 years ago. I mean, when I heard that, I was just like, I think I coined the phrase wage theft PTSD after that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. I've seen often it's top-notch salespeople to get fired because they're, I guess top-notch at any level because you're creating.
Well, they have more money to steal from to take to the bottom line to boost up those bonuses.
Absolutely. We should wrap in a minute. We could go forever, but we'll wrap in a minute.
It's been 10 minutes so far.
Lauren, do you want to a topic we didn't touch on? We touched on a lot.
No, just I mean, defend yourself, stand up for yourself, because even that $20,000 extra right now, if you are behind on your rent, you'll start going into debt, and then it compounds negatively for you. If you get more money now, and you want to put that into your bank account or into investments, it compounds positively for you. That 13 years example is interesting because, that $60,000 over 13 years, that could be a lot more right now. It could be an extra, $200,000 if it were put somewhere.
If you put it into Apple 13 years ago, you're worth about $10 million.
Yeah. I mean, that's that's a house or half of a house or something because you were taken advantage of at a time when your emotions were high or you were upset or whatever. Has meaningful impact over time. So consider the long game with all of this. But yeah, thanks for everybody who
That
commented.
was Lauren's way of pitching her Twitter feed, where you can go and get investment advice.
No, I don't give out.
In there, didn't you?
Yeah,
Love it.
it's on Snowflake.
This has been one of my favorite shows. Dan, come back anytime. You're a true tech bro now. People, you can find Dan you can look up his personal LinkedIn, Dan Goodman. Also, the agency now he calls Dan Goodman Employment Agency or Advisory.
Employment Advisory, yep.
EA, fantastic content on there really on a daily basis. And whether you're negotiating a contract or you're dealing with job loss, I would absolutely recommend. It's very rare that we ever endorse people or services or anything fully on this show. And even at the risk of sounding like a commercial, which this is no way is not, I fully endorse Dan because he's doing the right thing. Teaching people how to speak truth to power and get money and retain or reclaim their dignity. So thanks for the work you're doing.
Thank you. It's the most gratifying work of my life. I can tell you that.
Love it. All right. We will see everybody soon. And thanks for a great show. Happy Friday. Cheers.